We don't care who likes it or not, as long as we know it's the truth. As long as we know it's the truth.
In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. On the quest to gain, yes, he came from Spain. 83 men formed his crew, who will later become the perpetrators of a crime that has never been taught in school. So just keep in mind, let's go back in time to review some facts with you. Greetings world, it's Juan with Everything Truth here. First and foremost, I would like to apologize for sounding rather raspy. I'm currently coming down with an artificially created flu-like illness created by the chemtrail, neurodust, nanite, cybernetic, synthetic modified organisms known as Morgellons, which is an extraterrestrial synthetic parasite, an artificial life form designed for biological warfare on a global scale against the human race, coming out of United States military bases, NASA, Raytheon, DARPA, and Lockheed, to mention just a few. Go ahead and look into the DoD's global kill switch program known as Nano Domestic Quell for further reference on these matters. My throat is being ravished, bombarded by remote directed energy weaponry, so please bear with me here as I am doing everything in my power in terms of homeopathy and alternative medicine remedies to restore my health. Though I sound tremendously ill, rest assured that I am okay, for I am in God's hands here, and there's nothing to fear but fear itself. Anyways, guys, I've been following very closely this whole Migrant Caravan phenomenon. I wanted to speak on this, most especially because I have been a faithful student of human history for time immemorial, and I feel that I have valuable information, or at least a very unique and different perspective on this whole thing. Now, before I get into this, I need to stress that I am for all peoples of the earth. For some of you out there, what I'm about to say next might sound completely insane. The real enemy of the human race isn't even human to start with. The real enemy of the human race has infiltrated our society. It has used social engineering, eugenics, and other forms of clandestine, totalitarian manipulation, mind control, and deliberate infringement upon human consciousness and free will. It specializes in satanic, ritualistic abuse and black magic, sorcery, and crafts of the like to gain the upper hand over the innocence of humanity. It has deemed us its sustenance and views us as such. It has created a world around us for the sole purpose of exploiting our spiritual soul essence, our spiritual soul energy. It has engineered a spiritual prison, a human farm planet where our cities are linked to a highly advanced extraterrestrial AI quantum computers which monitors everything from the nanoscale up to the macro scale, monitoring, observing, plotting, scheming, and learning from us without our awareness. It has created a three-dimensional holographic projection matrix system superimposed upon the original creation, a counterfeit reality for us all. It has quite literally placed us in a box where it can play God over us. Now, with that being said, I would like to invite you on a journey far beyond false dichotomy politics, beyond the human construct of arbitrary separatist identifications, beyond acculturated indoctrinations and belief systems. For ultimate truth is nonpartisan and bears self-testimony and withstands the test of time to shine light over all creeds and nations indiscriminately, bringing forth enlightenment on a profound spiritual level. Furthermore, proceed with caution, for what I am about to reveal next is not for the squeamish of heart. It is not for those who cannot fathom uncomfortable truth, inconvenient historical facts, which may challenge and conflict with the very fabric of your cosmovision. Get ready to be unplugged from the matrix. If you are unwilling to step outside of your comfort zones and the pursuit of truth, then please leave now. For the rest of you, brace yourselves, for you are about to have a severe case of cognitive dissonance. Fellow patriots and die-hard Americans, you have been absolutely bamboozled. You have been deceived. And here is why. According to Volume 20, Corpus Juris Secundum, the United States government is a foreign corporation with respect to a state. According to Title 28, USC 3002, subsection 15A, United States means a federal corporation. The United States of America was incorporated in London in the year of 1783. The United States of America is a territory of Great Britain. For the colonists did not win the Revolutionary War, despite conventional belief. The British, in fact, did not leave until 1796. King George III of England financed both sides of the Revolutionary War. This is why a 1040 form is for tribute paid to Britain. For Great Britain is also owned by the Vatican with the Treaty of Verona of 1213. This is why the Pope can abolish any law within the United States. Elements of Ecclesiastical Law, Volume 1, 53, 54. The Pope claims to own the entire planet through the laws of conquest and discovery, with the papal bulls of 1495 and 1493. The Pope has ordered the genocide and enslavement of millions of people with the papal bulls of 1455 and 1493. The Pope's laws are obligatory on everyone. We are slaves and own absolutely nothing. Hence, you own no property, as slaves cannot own property. Read the deed to the property that you think you own. You are listed as a tenant, for we have been declared to be human capital, according to Executive Order 13037. Your name spelled in all capital letters is a corporation under canon law, Sestri KV, testamentary trust, via your birth certificate. This is also known as capitis diminutia maxima, which reduces one's freedoms to bondage. For a corporation is a dead body, a corpse. This is why we now live under the calendar of the dead, known as the Anno Domini Gregorian calendar system. The United States of America is a private, operated for-profit, foreign corporation with the District of Columbia Organic Act of 1871, with the 14th Amendment, citizen as its employee and or slave of the corporation. Look up the difference between an American national and a U.S. citizen. One has constitutional rights, whilst the other has corporate privileges which can be denied and revoked at will. For this reason, when you identify as a U.S. citizen, you cannot use the U.S. Constitution to defend yourself because you are not a party to it. For the U.S. Constitution applies solely to American nationals and not U.S. corporate citizens. Furthermore, look up the difference between the lowercase u in United States for America versus the all caps commercialized United States of America. One is a de jure constitutional republic and sovereign nation operating under common law, the law of the land, with American nationals, whilst the other is a private foreign operated for profit fictitious corporation with its own de facto constitution and U.S. citizenry operating under UCC, Maritime Admiralty Commercial Law, the law of the high seas, shadowed by the Holy See of Rome, subject of the Roman Pontiff, Vatican Corporation. Since the passing of the District of Columbia Organic Act of 1871, which usurped the original constitutional republic of the United States for America, the following is a timeline demonstrating when and how a private central banking cartel got control of the government and the people and assets of the United States. In 1913, President Woodrow Wilson passed the Federal Reserve Act, which allowed a private foreign banking cartel to operate as the central banking fiscal agents of the United States. Directly from the Federal Reserve Bank website of New York, quote, "The entry of the United States into World War I added to the responsibilities of the young Federal Reserve Bank. It helped finance U.S. military expenditures by becoming the fiscal agent of the federal government." End quote. In 1920, Congress handed the U.S. Treasury over to the same private banking cartel via the Independent Treasury Act. Later in 1921, the Council of Foreign Relations was founded to direct the media. Paul Warburg was the first director. Warburg also drafted the Federal Reserve Act and became the Fed's first governor. Paul Warburg was an agent for the foreign Rothschild banking dynasty. The Rothschild banking dynasty has handled the Vatican's wealth since 1823. The Jesuit order, working through the Rothschild dynasty, has sought to take control over the banking system of the United States. In 1925, the United States Corporation Company was chartered in perpetuity in Florida by its fiscal agent. This company was created without the approval of Congress, nor the knowledge and authority of the American people. In 1925, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York had offices on Cedar Street and on Broadway, both cited in the Articles of Incorporation. The United States Corporation Company created a maximum of 100 shares of stock. The Articles of Incorporation further revealed the names of 3 individuals who held only 5 shares. The other shareholders were not identified. The FCC, CIA, FBI, NASA, and all other alphabet gangs were never a part of the United States government, even though the United States government held shares of stock in various agencies. In the 1920s, the U.S. Treasury was raided by the private Federal Reserve Bank, ultimately resulting in the Great Depression and bankrupting the United States Corporation Company. In 1933, a state of emergency was declared and Congress gave the president unconstitutional emergency powers. With the Emergency Banking Relief Act of 1933, on behalf of the Federal Reserve Bank, President Roosevelt confiscated the people's gold and forced everyone to use Federal Reserve banking promissory notes to conduct commerce, essentially robbing the American people of their wealth. The Federal Reserve Bank is a private corporation. Therefore, their promissory notes or bills of exchange are privately owned currency. In 1933, the people and property of the United States was hypothecated and placed unlawfully in a public trust. To hypothecate means to pledge as security without delivery of possession. This means that we became the collateral liquidated assets to the Federal Reserve Bank through the insolvency of the United States Company Corporation. In 1933, the Internal Revenue Service was chartered in Delaware as a private corporation. It is not a division of the U.S. Treasury. The IRS is not a U.S. government agency. It is a debt collection agency of the International Monetary Fund. The IMF is an agency of the United Nations. For the U.S. has not had a treasury since 1921. The United States is a private corporation with unnamed stockholders. A private corporation is its fiscal agent. This means that a private corporation owns and circulates the currency we are forced to use. And this also means that a private corporation expects us, the American people, to pay them interest and taxes. The United States CEO, in other words, the president, has maintained unconstitutional emergency powers for the past 80 years. Yes, this country is a corporation, no different than Jesse Penny or McDonald's. This is why we have a president in office and not a king or emperor, because under UCC, all corporations must have a president, treasurer, and secretary in order to stay in business. Hence, all United States offices, officials, departments are now operating under a de facto status in name only under emergency war powers, with its constitutional form of government now fully dissolved. For the United States is just a corporate franchise network represented by its all caps commercialized names, with corporate statutes now replacing laws. A corporate statute are rules drawn by a corporation and given the force of law by consent of the parties. This consent generally requires a signed contract. Statutes, codes, rules, acts, and regulations are not laws. They are corporate fiction. The federal and state governments are not real. They are privately owned corporations called governments, and their laws are nothing more than corporate regulations called statutes. As corporations have no souls nor bodies to incarcerate, they are just dead legal structures. And because of this, a dead legal structure cannot represent living people nor obligate living souls to laws. A corporation cannot be a sovereign government. It can only be a legal structure for commercial contracts, and that is exactly what the United States franchise network is.
And so you see, your country has been bought and sold to a foreign banking cartel that has made complete slaves out of all of us. Now, considering this, and with that being said, I would like to remind Americans of a massive genocide and holocaust that took place here on this continental landmass, falsely called the Americas. A genocide that is ongoing, spanning over the last 5 centuries, commencing with Christopher Columbus in 1492. I would like to quote Mr. David E. Stannard, an American historian and professor of American Studies at the University of Hawaii, coming out of his book titled American Holocaust, The Conquest of the New World. Quote, population loss among native societies routinely reached and exceeded 95%, a rate of decline more than sufficient to account for a pre-Columbian hemispheric population in the neighborhood of 100 million, end quote. Furthermore, quote, the destruction of the Indians of the Americas was far and away the most massive act of genocide in the history of the world. This is why, as one historian aptly has said, far from the heroic and romantic heraldry that customarily is used to symbolize European settlement of the Americas, the emblem most congruent with reality would be a pyramid of skulls, end quote. And so, why am I resorting to Native American suffering here? It's because the people in those migrant caravans coming here are mostly Mayans, so-called Native American Indians, who have been here for thousands upon thousands of years, way before any German ever set foot on this continent.
They want to throw rocks at our military fights back. We're going to consider it, and I told them, consider it a rifle. When they throw rocks like they did at the Mexico military and police, I say, consider it a rifle.
Jill, I heard Paul Rykoff, the founder of IAVA, Iraq Combat Veteran, tonight on another network saying they got rocks thrown at them constantly in Iraq. They never emptied their clip at someone in return. You couldn't ask for more of a broad contrast between these two events today. Absolutely. The contrast here could not be clearer.
As far as the caravan is concerned, our military is out. We have about 5,008. We'll go up to anywhere between 10 and 15,000 military personnel on top of Border Patrol, ICE, and everybody else at the border. Nobody's coming in. We're not allowing people to come in. If you look at what happened in Mexico 2 days ago with the roughness of these people in the second caravan that's been forming, and also, frankly, in the first caravan, and now they have one forming in El Salvador. And we are thinking very seriously, immediately stopping aid to those countries because, frankly, they're doing nothing for the American people. Immigration is a very, very big and very dangerous, a really dangerous topic. And we're not going to allow people to come into our country that don't have the well-being of our country in mind.
Have you thought about a specific act?
So we have the worst laws in the history of the world because we don't have a big enough majority. We have great people standing behind me. We could write up the laws in a half an hour. You'd have the greatest laws that would stop all the problems. The problem is we need support from Democrats because we have small majorities, especially in the Senate. Because in the Senate, we need 9 votes. I'm not going to get 9 votes. I'm not going to vote. They always vote in a block. They'll do anything to hurt the Republican Party, even if it hurts. And me in particular, by the way, I hate to say, but even if it hurts, no matter what, even if it hurts our nation, we could have laws drawn in 1 hour or less. They're already drawn to solve every one of these problems, but we can't get the Democrats. That's why I hope Republicans get out and vote and give us majorities where we can do what we have to do. But we give a lot of money to these countries. If you look El Salvador, if you look at what we give to Honduras and Guatemala, tens of millions of dollars. In one case, $400 million. They do nothing for us. I called them, I said very nicely, you're not going to get any money if you let this happen. And all of a sudden, they're starting to close it up tightly. They're trying. A lot of people have gathered, and a lot of people are looking at Democrats. Why did they gather? You know, there's a lot of information that is being, hopefully you people are looking, but how come this happened? Because people are saying there's a lot of money being passed around so that this would normally hit just before an election. But I happen to think it's a great issue for the Republicans. This is a great Republican issue. With that being said, I called Mexico. We just drew a great new deal with Mexico. We have a very good relationship with Mexico. I said, look, we have lousy laws. I hope you're not going to let these people come through your country and march 1,000 miles up through your country and come through our borders because our laws are horrendous. And as of this moment, you see better than I do because I haven't been able to see it. We've been so busy with water for California. But it's being stopped as of this moment by Mexico. So we appreciate very much what Mexico is doing. But as of this moment, you see what's happening. It's being stopped. But your 4,000 people got together. And they got together in a certain way. And a lot of people, I hope you people are going to look at why this happened at this time. But it's okay. We are about law and order and borders and jobs. And they are about allowing crime to enter our country with open borders. Because many of those people, a percentage, fairly big percentage of those people are criminals. And they want to come into our country. And they're criminals. And it's not happening on my watch. It's not going to happen. So as of this moment, I thank Mexico. I hope they continue. But as of this moment, I thank Mexico. If that doesn't work out, we're calling up the military. Not the Guard, we're calling up the military. And we're going to have the military stationed. They're not coming into this country. They might as well turn back. They're not coming into this country.
The deployment of active duty U.S. armed forces to the U.S.-Mexican border in an operation named Faithful Patriot with lethal force authorized is a scandal. This is a shameful misuse and abuse of the U.S. military in service of Trump's desperate political stunts.
That regardless of the operational contingencies we face, along with its interagency partners and unprecedented support from DoD, CBP will ensure border security. We will not allow a large group to enter the U.S. unlawfully. We will maintain lawful trade and travel to the greatest extent possible. We will act in accordance with the highest principles of law enforcement. We will treat intending migrants humanely and professionally at all times. And the safety of CBP personnel, especially our law enforcement personnel on the front lines, as well as the traveling public, will remain paramount. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Commissioner McElwain, for the partnership and the opportunity today to speak about how U.S. Northern Command, as the operational command for the Department of Defense Forces, is providing mission-enhancing capabilities to the Department of Homeland Security and U.S. Customs and Border Protection to harden the southern border. DoD has a long history of supporting DHS, and now, more than ever, U.S. Northern Command has a well-established relationship with the Department of Homeland Security. Examples include the recent support for Hurricane Michael, Hurricane Florence, our cybersecurity initiatives, and our critical infrastructure protection that we're doing with the Department of Homeland Security. Our mission of Homeland Defense is inextricably linked to the Department of Homeland Security's mission of Homeland Security. Operation Faithful Patriot, as we've named the military operation supporting CBP in hardening the southwest border, is the latest example of this critical partnership. In a macro sense, our concept of operations is to flow in our military assets with a priority to build up southern Texas, and then Arizona, and then California. We'll reinforce along priority points of entry so as to enhance CBP's ability to harden and secure the border. The specific request for assistance is for the active duty military to enhance the capacity and capabilities of CBP by providing robust military capabilities. Our first level of effort with CBP will be to harden the points of entry and address key gaps in areas around the points of entry. And here's a list of just some of the capability that we're bringing. First, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They bring amazing expertise, earned through years of experience under challenging conditions, including the current work of building the border wall. We're also bringing 3 highly experienced and capable combat engineering battalions with expertise in building temporary vehicle barriers, fencing, and are bringing them in with heavy equipment, which as we speak right now is line hauling towards Texas. We're bringing military planning teams that are already actively engaged with their CBP counterparts. We've integrated command and control capabilities. We're working with our aviation, engineering, medical, and logistic resources to bring them to bear. We're bringing 3 medium-lift helicopter companies in. These are aircraft equipped with the latest technology. They're enhanced with optics. They have NVGs. They have sensors that will allow them to operate at night and be able to provide assistance to bring our CBP personnel exactly where they need to be, regardless of the conditions. We'll be able to spot and identify groups and rapidly deploy CBP personnel where they're needed. The helicopters will ensure the CBP agents can arrive in the most austere locations. They can fast rope down if they need to. They can conduct and work their law enforcement activities. These aircraft will also ensure those agents needing medical assistance will be able to get that assistance when required. In addition, we're bringing military police units. We're bringing strategic airlift to bear. As we sit right now, we have 3 C-130s and a C-17 that is ready to deploy CBP personnel wherever they need to be at any time. We have deployable medical units. We have the logistical support. We have command posts. We're bringing in command posts so we can combine with CBP, and we have combined command posts where our operational commanders will be working side by side to integrate our efforts. And make no mistakes, as we sit right here today, we have about 800 soldiers that are on their way to Texas right now. They're coming from Fort Campbell, they're coming from Fort Knox. They're moving closer to the border. They're going to continue their training, and they're ready to deploy to be actually employed on the border. We're deploying aviation assets that can quickly transport our CBP personnel. But it isn't just the men and equipment and the soldiers that we're bringing. We've already brought critical material, and it's already in place. We have enough concertina wire to cover up to 22 miles already deployed, already to the border. We have additional concertina wire that we can string with over 150 miles available. Additionally, working out where the reinforcements are needed so we can get it exactly where CBP wants us to get it. By the end of this week, we will deploy over 5,200 soldiers to the southwest border. That is just the start of this operation. We'll continue to adjust the numbers and inform you of those, but please know that's in addition to the 2,092 that are already employed from our National Guard Operation Guardian Support that's been so effective. And my final point I'd like to stress is that everything I've discussed here fully adheres to our current authorities and governed by law and policy. We know border security is national security, and the U.S. military will advance CBP's capability to harden the border. Department of Defense is already and will continue to provide support to CBP to secure the border. Thank you.
People are coming over from Honduras. We have like 5,000 people, Honduras and Guatemala, El Salvador. And some of these people are hardened criminals, not good people. And they broke through in Guatemala. I said, look, we give you hundreds of millions of dollars, Guatemala, and you're going to stop those people from coming. And they tried, and they broke right through, and they broke through the fences. And Mexico is now really fighting a very tough situation. Mexican soldiers have been hurt, badly hurt in a couple of cases. But I very much respect the fact that Mexico is willing to do this. But these are some bad people coming through. These aren't babies. These aren't little angels coming into our country and going to, go to work for Boeing and go to work for Raytheon and for Lockheed and do a great job. These are some hardened criminals coming in. And we're not letting them in. So I could sit down with Democrats and work this thing out in 1 hour. And we need a wall. We have to have a wall. We're building the wall now, but we should build it very fast. We should build it, frankly, we should build it even higher, because these people are incredible. They can scale them, they could do things you wouldn't believe. But we have a wall, it's going up. We should be able to build that in 1 year. And we could do it in 1 year. So we'll see what happens. I think this is going to be a real wake-up call for the Democrats and for the public. People are very angry about it. Very, very angry. Please, don't be a baby. Okay? Take a look. Okay, just take a look. Look at what's happening. Look at the Mexican soldiers that are laying on the ground. Take a look. These are hardened. I didn't say in all cases, but in many cases, these are hardened criminals. These are tough people. And I don't want them in our country. And neither does our country want them in our country.
The president is taking new steps to block that caravan from entering this country. He campaigned in Missouri after moving to limit where migrants can apply for asylum and suggesting that border violence could be met with gunfire. He says if they throw rocks, officers should feel okay about shooting back with bullets. The president visits West Virginia and Indiana later today, part of an 8-state swing in the final days of the campaign.
Blunting Republican midterm political momentum. Back on immigration, the president called for tighter border security, and he also offered some exaggerated claims about the migrant threat.
We called up the military because we're not going to let people come into our country. When you look at that illegally, not going to happen.
President Trump told an overflow crowd in central Missouri he would seal the southern border in advance of a Honduran migrant caravan still weeks away.
These are some bad people coming through there. These aren't babies. These are our little angels coming into our country and going to, go to work for Boeing and go to work for Raytheon and for Lockheed and do a great job. These are some hardened criminals coming in. And we're not letting them in.
Today, Trump tweeted, "Criminals and unknown Middle Easterners are mixed in. I have alerted Border Patrol and military that this is a national emergency." When reporters asked him for evidence to support that tweet, Trump offered this instead.
Take your camera, go into the middle, and search. You're going to find MS-13, you're going to find Middle Eastern, you're going to find everything. And guess what? We're not allowing them in our country. We want safety.
Los hacen para obtener recursos, ¿no? Sí. ¿Cuántas han vendido? ¿Cuántas venden?
Hemos vendido de 20, de 15.
Sí.
The journalist you're about to hear from was walking with the caravan, documenting the journey. She says she hasn't seen that criminal element Trump is talking about, just people fleeing difficult circumstances.
There are a lot of people who've suffered extortion. Perhaps they've got small businesses, they've suffered extortion, they have to pay a certain amount, usually an amount they can't afford, in order to be left alone by the gang members.
But it isn't just violence. There are stories of people who are struggling to afford basic necessities, who say there just isn't enough work to go around.
One man I spoke to yesterday, he was a coffee farmer. He'd had to mortgage his farm, his car, and his house to put his 5 children through school, and even then it wasn't enough. So he's left them all back in Honduras.
The president also said active duty soldiers would return fire if migrants threw rocks at them.
We will consider that a firearm, because there's not much difference when you get hit in the face with a rock. But in many cases, these are hardened criminals. These are tough people. And I don't want them in our country. And neither does our country want them in our country.
Remember, Native Americans welcomed the Pilgrims and the Spaniards with open arms, fed them, clothed them, and even protected them from other hostile members of the tribes at times, only to be repaid by betrayal and murdered in cold blood in exchange. Real Christians would be waiting at the border with food, water, clothing, and shelter for the caravan. Instead, we have hostile expressions of violence coming from you guys, such as these, such as this, and this, and this, and this. I thought we lived in a Christian nation. I thought we lived in a civilized nation. Is this what you guys call Christian? Is this what you guys call civilized? And as to who's really behind the migrant caravan, you'd be surprised, for it is none other than CIA economic hitmen going around destabilizing regions throughout the planet.
We economic hitmen really have been the ones responsible for creating this first truly global empire. And we work many different ways. But perhaps the most common is that we will identify a country that has resources our corporations covet, like oil, and then arrange a huge loan to that country from the World Bank or one of its sister organizations. But the money never actually goes to the country. Instead, it goes to our big corporations to build infrastructure projects in that country, power plants, industrial parks, ports, things that benefit a few rich people in that country, in addition to our corporations, but really don't help the majority of the people at all. However, those people, the whole country is left holding a huge debt. It's such a big debt they can't repay it, and that's part of the plan, that they can't repay it. And so at some point, we economic hitmen go back to them and say, listen, you owe us a lot of money, can't pay your debt, so sell your oil real cheap to our oil companies. Allow us to build a military base in your country, or send troops in support of ours to someplace in the world like Iraq, or vote with us on the next UN vote. To have their electric utility company privatized and their water and sewage system privatized and sold to U.S. corporations or other multinational corporations. So there was that whole mushrooming thing, and it's so typical of the way the IMF and the World Bank work. That you put a country in debt, it's such a big debt it can't pay it, and then you offer to refinance that debt and pay even more interest. And you demand this quid pro quo, which you call a conditionality or good governance, which means basically that they've got to sell off their resources, including many of their social services, their utility companies, their school systems sometimes, their penal systems, their insurance systems, to foreign corporations. So it's a double, triple, quadruple whammy. The precedent for economic hitmen really began back in the early 50s when democratically elected Mossadegh, who was elected in Iran, he was considered to be the hope for democracy in the Middle East and around the world. He was Time Magazine's Man of the Year. But one of the things that he'd run on and began to implement was the idea that foreign oil companies needed to pay the Iranian people a lot more for the oil that they were taking out of Iran. The Iranian people should benefit from their own oil. Strange policy. We didn't like that, of course. But we were afraid to do what we normally were doing, which was to send in the military. Instead, we sent in one CIA agent, Kermit Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt's relative. And Kermit went in with a few $1 million and was very, very effective and efficient. And in a short amount of time, he managed to get Mossadegh overthrown and brought in the Shah of Iran to replace him, who always was favorable to oil. And it was extremely effective.
Mobs overflow Tehran. Army officers shout that Mossadegh has surrendered and his regime as virtual dictator of Iran is ended. Pictures of the Shah are paraded through the streets as sentiment reverses. The Shah is welcomed home.
So back here in the United States, in Washington, people looked around and said, wow, that was easy and cheap. So this established a whole new way of manipulating countries, of creating empire. The only problem with Roosevelt was that he was a card-carrying CIA agent, and had he been caught, the ramifications could have been pretty serious. So very quickly at that point, the decision was made to use private consultants to channel the money through the World Bank or the IMF or one of the other such agencies, to bring in people like me who worked for private companies, so that if we got caught, there would be no governmental ramifications. When Arbenz became president of Guatemala, the country was very much under the thumbs of United Fruit Company, the big international corporations. And Arbenz ran on this ticket that says, you know, we want to get the land back to the people. And once he took power, he was implementing policies that would do exactly that, give land rights back to the people. United Fruit didn't like that very much. And so they hired a public relations firm, launched a huge campaign in the United States to convince the United States, the people, the citizens of the United States, and the press of the United States, and the Congress of the United States, that Arbenz was a Soviet puppet, and that if we allowed him to stay in power, the Soviets would have a foothold in this hemisphere. And that at that point in time was a huge fear on everybody's mind, the Red Terror, the Communist terror. And so, to make a long story short, out of this public relations campaign came a commitment on the part of the CIA and the military to take this man out. And in fact, we did. We sent in planes, we sent in soldiers, we sent in jackals, we sent everything in to take him out, and did take him out. And as soon as he was removed from office, the new guy that took over after him basically reinstated everything to the big international corporations, including United Fruit. Ecuador for many, many years had been ruled by pro-U.S. dictators, often relatively brutal. Then it was decided that they were going to have a truly democratic election. Jaime Roldos ran for office. And his main goal, he said, as president would be to make sure that Ecuador's resources were used to help the people. And he won, overwhelming, by more votes than anybody had ever won anything in Ecuador. And he began to implement these policies to make sure that the profits from oil went to help the people. Well, we didn't like that in the United States. I was sent down as one of several economic hitmen to change Roldos, to corrupt him, to bring him around, to let him know, you know, okay, you know, you can get very rich, you and your family, if you play our game, but if you continue to try to keep these policies you've promised, you're going to go. He wouldn't listen. He was assassinated. As soon as the plane crashed, the whole area was cordoned off. The only people that allowed in were U.S. military from a nearby base and some of the Ecuadorian military. When an investigation was launched, 2 of the key witnesses died in car accidents before they had a chance to testify. A lot of very, very strange things that went on around the assassination of Jaime Roldos. I, like most people who've really looked at this case, have absolutely no doubt that it was an assassination. And of course, in my position as an economic hitman, I was always expecting something to happen to Jaime, whether it be a coup or assassination, I wasn't sure, but that he would be taken down because he was not being corrupted. He would not allow himself to be corrupted the way we wanted to corrupt him. Omar Torrijos, president of Panama, was, one of my favorite people. I really, really liked him. He was very charismatic. He was a guy who really wanted to help his country. And when I tried to bribe him or corrupt him, he said, look, John, he called me Juanito. He said, look, Juanito, I don't need the money. What I really need is for my country to be treated fairly. I need for the United States to repay the debts that you owe my people for all the destruction you've done here. I need to be in a position where I can help other Latin American countries win their independence and be free of this terrible presence from the north that you people are exploiting us so badly. I need to have the Panama Canal back in the hands of the Panamanian people. That's what I want. And so, leave me alone. Don't try to bribe me. It was 1981, and in May, Jaime Roldos was assassinated. And Omar was very aware of this. Torrijos got his family together and he said, I'm probably next, but it's okay because I've done what I came here to do. I've renegotiated the canal. The canal will now be in our hands. He just finished negotiating the treaty with Jimmy Carter. In June of that same year, just a couple of months later, he also went down in an airplane crash, which there's no question was executed by CIA-sponsored jackals. Tremendous amount of evidence that one of Torrijos' security guards handed him at the last moment as he was getting on the plane a tape recorder, a small tape recorder that contained a bomb. It is interesting to me how this system has continued pretty much the same way for years and years and years, except the economic hitmen have got better and better and better. Then we come up with, very recently, what happened in Venezuela. In 1998, Hugo Chavez gets elected president, following a long line of presidents who had been very corrupt and basically destroyed the economy of the country. And Chavez was elected amidst all that. Chavez stood up to the United States, and he's done it primarily demanding that Venezuelan oil be used to help the Venezuelan people. Well, we didn't like that in the United States. So in 2002, a coup was staged, which there's no question in my mind, and most other people's minds, that the CIA was behind that coup. The way that coup was fomented was very reflective of what Kermit Roosevelt had done in Iran, of paying people to go out into the streets, to riot, to protest, to say this Chavez is very unpopular. If you can get a few thousand people to do that, television can make it look like it's the whole country, and things start to mushroom. Except in the case of Chavez, he was smart enough, and the people were so strongly behind him that they overcame it, which was a phenomenal moment in the history of Latin America. Iraq actually is a perfect example of the way the whole system works. So we economic hitmen are the first line of defense. We go in and we try to corrupt governments and get them to accept these huge loans, which we then use as leverage to basically own them. If we fail, as I failed in Panama with Omar Torrijos and in Ecuador with Jaime Roldos, men who refuse to be corrupted, then the second line of defense is we send in the jackals. And the jackals either overthrow governments or they assassinate. And once that happens, when a new government comes in, boy, it's going to toe the line because the new president knows what will happen if he doesn't. In the case of Iraq, both of those things failed. Economic hitmen were not able to get through to Saddam Hussein. We tried very hard. We tried to get him to accept a deal very similar to what the House of Saud had accepted in Saudi Arabia, but he wouldn't accept it. And so the jackals went in to take him out. They couldn't do it. His security was very good. After all, he had one time worked for the CIA. He'd been hired to assassinate a former president of Iraq and failed, but he knew the system. So in '91 we send in the troops and we take out the Iraqi military. So we assume at that point that Saddam Hussein is going to come around. We could have taken him out, of course, at that time, but we didn't want to. He's the kind of strong man we like. He controls his people. We thought he could control the Kurds and keep the Iranians in their border and keep pumping oil for us. And then once we took out his military, now he's going to come around. So the economic hitmen go back in the 90s without success. If they'd had success, he'd still be running the country. We'd be selling him all the fighter jets he wants and everything else he wants. But they couldn't. They didn't have success. The jackals couldn't take him out again. So we sent the military in once again, and this time we did the complete job and took him out, and in the process created for ourselves some very, very lucrative construction deals. We had to reconstruct a country that we'd essentially destroyed, which is a pretty good deal if you own construction companies, big ones. So, Iraq shows the three stages. The economic hitmen failed there, the jackals failed there, and as a final measure, the military goes in. And in that way, we've really created an empire, but we've done it very, very subtly. It's clandestine. All the empires of the past were built on the military, and everybody knew they were building them. So the British knew they were building them, the French, the Germans, the Romans, the Greeks, and they were proud of it. And they always had some excuse, like spreading civilization, spreading some religion, something like that. But they knew they were doing it. We don't. The majority of the people in the United States have no idea that we're living off the benefits of a clandestine empire, that today there's more slavery in the world than ever before. And then you have to ask yourself, well, if it's an empire, then who's the emperor? Obviously, our presidents of the United States are not emperors. An emperor is someone who's not elected, doesn't serve a limited term, and doesn't report to anyone, essentially. So you can't classify our presidents that way. But we do have what I consider to be the equivalent of the emperor, and it's what I call the corporatocracy. The corporatocracy is this group of individuals who run our biggest corporations, and they really act as the emperor of this empire. They control our media, either through direct ownership or advertising. They control most of our politicians because they finance their campaigns, either through their corporations or through personal contributions that come out of the corporations. They're not elected, they don't serve a limited term, they don't report to anybody. And at the very top of the corporatocracy, you really can't tell whether a person's working for a private corporation or the government because they're always moving back and forth. So, you've got a guy who one moment is the president of a big construction company like Halliburton, and the next moment he's vice president of the United States, or the president who is in the oil business. And this is true whether you've got Democrats or Republicans in the office. You have to moving back and forth through the revolving door. And in a way, our government is invisible a lot of the time, and its policies are carried out by our corporations on one level or another. And then again, the policies of the government are basically forged by the corporatocracy and then presented to the government. They become government policy. So it's an incredibly cozy relationship. This isn't a conspiracy theory type of thing. These people don't have to get together and plot to do things. They all basically work under one primary assumption, and that is that they must maximize profits regardless of the social and environmental costs.
This process of manipulation by the corporatocracy through the use of debt, bribery, and political overthrow is called globalization. Just as the Federal Reserve keeps the American public in a position of indentured servitude through perpetual debt, inflation, and interest, the World Bank and IMF serve this role on a global scale. The basic scam is simple. Put a country in debt either by its own indiscretion or through corrupting the leader of that country, then impose conditionalities or structural adjustment policies, often consisting of the following. Currency devaluation. When the value of a currency drops, so does everything valued in it. This makes indigenous resources available to predator countries at a fraction of their worth. Large funding cuts for social programs. These usually include education and healthcare, compromising the well-being and integrity of the society, leaving the public vulnerable to exploitation. Privatization of state-owned enterprises. This means that socially important systems can be purchased and regulated by foreign corporations for profit. For example, in 1999, the World Bank insisted that the Bolivian government sell the public water system of its third largest city to a subsidy of the U.S. corporation Bechtel. As soon as this occurred, water bills for the already impoverished local residents skyrocketed. It wasn't until after a full-blown revolt by the people that the Bechtel contract was nullified. Then there is trade liberalization, or the opening up of the economy through removing any restrictions on foreign trade. This allows for a number of abusive economic manifestations, such as transnational corporations bringing in their own mass-produced products, undercutting the indigenous production and ruining local economies. An example is Jamaica, which, after accepting loans and conditionalities from the World Bank, lost its largest cash crop markets due to competition with Western imports. Today, countless farmers are out of work, for they are unable to compete with the large corporations. Another variation is the creation of numerous seemingly unnoticed, unregulated, inhumane sweatshop factories, which take advantage of the imposed economic hardship. Additionally, due to production deregulation, environmental destruction is perpetual, as a country's resources are often exploited by the indifferent corporations while outputting large amounts of deliberate pollution.
The largest environmental lawsuit in the history of the world today is being brought on behalf of 30,000 Ecuadorian Amazonian people against Texaco, which is now owned by Chevron. So today it's against Chevron, but for activities conducted by Texaco. Estimated to be more than 18 times what the Exxon Valdez dumped into the coast of Alaska. In the case of Ecuador, it wasn't an accident. The oil companies did it intentionally. They knew they were doing it to save money out there rather than arranging for proper disposal.
Furthermore, a cursory glance at the performance record of the World Bank reveals that the institution, which publicly claims to help poor countries develop and alleviate poverty, has done nothing but increase poverty and the wealth gap, while corporate profits soar. In 1960, the income gap between the fifth of the world's people in the richest countries versus the fifth in the poorest countries was 30 to 1. By 1998, it was 74 to 1. While global GNP rose 40% between 1970 and 1985, those in poverty actually increased by 17%. While from 1985 to 2000, those living on less than $1 a day increased by 18%. Even the Joint Economic Committee of the U.S. Congress admitted that there is a mere 40% success rate of all World Bank projects. In the late 1960s, the World Bank intervened in Ecuador with large loans. During the next 30 years, poverty grew from 50% to 70%. Under or unemployment grew from 15 to 70%. Public debt increased from $240 million to $16 billion, while the share of resources allocated to the poor went from 20% to 6%. In fact, by the year 2000, 50% of Ecuador's national budget had to be allocated for paying its debts. It is important to understand the World Bank is, in fact, a U.S. bank, supporting U.S. interests. For the United States holds veto power over decisions, as it is the largest provider of capital. And where did it get this money? You guessed it. It made it out of thin air through the fractional reserve banking system. Of the world's top 100 economies, as based on annual GDP, 51 are corporations, and 47 of that 51 are U.S. based. Walmart, General Motors, and Exxon are more economically powerful than Saudi Arabia, Poland, Norway, South Africa, Finland, Indonesia, and many others. And as protective trade barriers are broken down, currencies tossed together and manipulated in floating markets, and state economies overturned in favor of open competition and global capitalism, the empire expands.
You get up on your little 21-inch screen and howl about America and democracy. There is no America. There is no democracy. There is only IBM and ITT and AT&T and DuPont, Dow, Union Carbide, and Exxon. Those are the nations of the world today. What do you think the Russians talk about in their councils of state? Karl Marx? They get out their linear programming charts, statistical decision theories, Minimax solutions, and compute the price-cost probabilities of their transactions and investments, just like we do. We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies, Mr. Beale. The world is a college of corporations, inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business, Mr. Beale.
The true terrorists of our world do not meet at the docks at midnight or scream Allah Akbar before some violent action. The true terrorists of our world wear $5,000 suits and work in the highest positions of finance, government, and business. The world is being taken over by a handful of business powers who dominate the natural resources we need to live while controlling the money we need to obtain these resources. The end result will be world monopoly, based not on human life, but financial and corporate power.
And for all you out there who want to scapegoat and benefit off of the vulnerable, impoverished condition of Native Americans, you outright disgust me, and you should be ashamed of yourselves. You dare use Jesus Christ's name in vain and call yourselves Christians to commit genocide? And you think Jesus Christ has your back? Well, good luck, because this time you are wrong. This time, not even Jesus Christ has your back. Swallow that and let that sink in. For you are full of hate and you are full of fear. And for all of you out there who are concerned about the New World Order, well, let me tell you something about the New World Order. The New World Order is based on a feudal serf fascist ideology that was born out of the Catholic Church, the Roman Empire taking over the New World, quote unquote, or what is falsely called the Americas. So when you talk about the New World Order, my ancestors survived the New World Order. 95% of our population collapsed at the expense of 95% population growth of Europeans, starting in 1492. In fact, the so-called discovery of the Americas and the wealth that was stolen out of the exploitation and enslavement of my ancestors is what got Europe out of the Dark Ages and plummeted our civilizations in the process, made us poor, made us ignorant, made us the trash and the scum of the earth, while you guys relished and enriched yourselves at our expense. Now, I would like to share a excerpt of Alex Jones' documentary titled Endgame, depicting the New World Order master plans for humanity, so that you guys understand that this actually already took place starting in 1492 against Native Americans and the rest of the non-white populations of the earth.
in the near future. Earth is dominated by a powerful world government. Once free nations are slaves to the will of a tiny elite. The dawn of a new dark age is upon mankind. Countries are a thing of the past. Every form of independence is under attack, with the family and even the individual itself nearing extinction. Close to 80% of the Earth's population has been eliminated. The remnants of a once free humanity are forced to live within highly controlled, compact, prison-like cities. Travel is highly restricted. Superhighways connect the megacities and keep the population from entering into unauthorized zones. No human activity is private. AI supercomputers chronicle and categorize every action. A prison planet dominated by a ruthless gang of control freaks, whose power can never be challenged. This is the vision of the global elite, their goal. A program of total dehumanization, where the science of tyranny is law. A worldwide control grid, designed to ensure the overlord's monopoly of power forever. Our species will be condemned to this nightmare future unless the masses are awakened to the New World Order master plan and mobilized to defeat it. Erected by a secretive group, the Georgia Guidestones are a testament to the elite's plan for a world religion, global laws, with a global court and army to enforce it. And set in stone, it is written that the population never rise above 500 million.
And so, for Europe, and the U.S. corporation and other Roman Pontiff colonies crying about illegal immigration, quote unquote, remember your history and how your ancestors unlawfully broke into, invaded, and colonized all regions of the earth with complete disregard for human life, using extreme violence against and showing complete disdain through acts of hatred for indigenous Australian Aboriginals, Tasmanians, and what happened here in the Americas, bringing into account how Native Americans provided hospitality for the conquistadors and the pilgrims, only to be rewarded with betrayal, violence, resulting in 100 million killed within the first 150 years of European contact, wiping out 5 major civilizations in the process for the genocide that took place in Hawaii, all of Africa, especially South Africa, and Madagascar, what happened in India, what you did to the people of the Middle East, especially what is currently happening to the Palestinians, and even forcing opium upon the Chinese, and what you have done to the Filipinos, the Vietnamese, and most recently the Iraqis, the Japanese, the North Koreans, and the rest of the non-European peoples of the earth. Look, in case you guys haven't realized it, God's judgment is upon you now. 500 years of unlawful, ungodly, imperialist colonial genocide would be rectified on a global scale without violence. It would be done through the spoken word, the word of truth. For those illegals wouldn't be coming into your countries if y'all didn't destabilize theirs with CIA economic hitmen. Those who you spit upon and are threatening violence against, coming in those so-called migrant caravans, are mostly Mayans. The Mayans were one of the most advanced cultures to ever exist on Earth until they were destroyed through biological warfare by European immigrants. The Mayans gave us so much in terms of mathematics, astronomy, agriculture, and even modern-day medicine and textiles, along with advancements in architecture and military tactics y'all take for granted today. The Mayans were destroyed by European immigrants. Take this, they invented one of 5 originally created writing systems amongst humanity, and the Spanish burned all our libraries and outlawed our culture, forbidding us from existing as we did before 1492. With the passing of the Spanish cedilla from the Spanish crown of 1577, our culture was made illegal. Not to mention 70% to 77% of all plant-based edible foods were cultivated and domesticated consciously by Native Americans, yet we are considered to be the trash of humanity today. Well, I hate to break it to you, but y'all made natives this way, and wickedly directly benefited from our downfall in the process. All the wealth that was stolen and extorted out of the Mexica, the so-called Aztec, and Runa and Quechua, the so-called Inca empires, is what gave birth to modern-day capitalism. That is a fact. And as we all know, Christians aren't supposed to be stealing. The way you deal with the migrant caravan will define your character from that point onwards. For the whole world is watching, including ETs and God. Now, will this be another Native American massacre? I sure hope not. But one thing is for sure. Donald Trump's presidential administration has been deemed Jacksonian in nature. For Donald Trump has even hanged a portrait of Andrew Jackson in the Oval Office. And there's a reason for this. Andrew Jackson was responsible for the Trail of Tears, which was a forced migration of Native American tribes from one region of the continent to another. And for all you well-meaning Americans out there who get offended by this message, your government don't give a fuck about you. You're a slave to these people. You're nothing but human capital, maritime admiralty products to be sold on the global market. Yes, you are now slaves, just like you made slaves out of the Africans, just like you made slaves out of Native Americans and Asians and the rest of the non-white populations of the world. That's why you have the 14th Amendment. The U.S. citizen is an employee and or slave of the corporation. A corporation that belongs to the Federal Reserve System. The Federal Reserve System, which is controlled directly from the Vatican and its secret societies and banking dynasties. P.S. Let's remember that after World War II, the U.S. government, with the OSS, which is a predecessor of the CIA, welcomed and illegally smuggled Nazi war criminal refugees into the country, essentially aiding and abetting war criminals, so long as they were willing to work for the U.S. government. So for Donald Trump to be saying that there are some really dangerous and really bad people coming in those caravans, and even going as far as saying that there are ISIS terrorist cells and gang members within them, is completely absurd and a testament of the complete and utter hypocrisy coming out of his administration. Get real, guys. God is watching you. Now, I'll leave you with some pertinent facts regarding the Mayan civilization.
From the air, it looks like just jungle, but these forests in Guatemala hide an ancient secret. The city of Mirador, often referred to as the cradle of Mayan civilization, the size of a modern-day metropolis. This is no mountain, it's a pyramid, and according to the Mirador Basin Project, it may be the largest pyramid by volume in the world.
The Pyramid Levante is a structure the world should know because it represents an investment of labor unprecedented in the world history. Every single stone in that building, from the bottom to the top, was carried by human labor.
And when we talk about sheer size of this area that is El Mirador, just one single Mayan city, archaeologist Dr. Richard Hansen says its size is larger than all of downtown Los Angeles, and he says there are still thousands of pyramids yet to be uncovered.
We see buildings aligned to track the rising of the sun or aligned to the movements of Venus.
Cosmically aligned, like all Maya cities, every building in the heart of Tikal has been extensively mapped. But hidden in the jungle, it has never been possible to see it in all its glory. Until now.
So this is the world famous Tikal.
Yep, that's the way it looks now.
Let's see Tikal naked. But now we've done it.
Now we see without the trees.
After more than a century of study, archaeologists thought they knew every inch of Tikal. But they were wrong.
Under the tree canopies in the jungles of northern Guatemala, tens of thousands of structures built by the Maya over a millennium ago have been found. Not far from the sites tourists already know, like the towering temples of the ancient city of Tikal, laser technology has uncovered around 60,000 homes, palaces, tombs, and even highways in the humid lowlands. The landscape is thought to have been home to millions more people than other research had previously suggested. The researchers mapped over 810 square miles in northern Petan, and archaeologists believe the cutting-edge technology will change the way the world views the Maya civilization. At its peak, around 1,500 years ago, the Maya civilization covered an area around twice the size of medieval England, with an estimated population of around 5 million. But with the new data, it's no longer unreasonable to think there was somewhere around 10 to 15 million people living there, including many living in the low-lying swampy areas that many archaeologists thought were uninhabitable. The archaeologists were struck by the incredible defensive features, which included walls, fortresses, and moats, and they showed that the Maya invested more resources into defending themselves than previously thought. Most spectacularly is that one of the finds is a 7-story pyramid, so covered in vegetation that it practically melts into the jungle. Another discovery that surprised archaeologists was a complex network of causeways linking all of the Maya cities in the area. The raised highways allowed easy passage even during the rainy seasons and were wide enough to suggest they were heavily trafficked and used for trade. In the past, the jungle has always hindered archaeological discoveries, but this time it has acted as a great preservation tool, and now we're about to uncover some breathtaking new discoveries that will literally change history.
Not only were the Mayans far more numerous than they ever anticipated, but also the amount of buildings that have been revealed is absolutely astonishing and proves that this part of the planet was a thriving, bustling area of technological advancements. We need to start to wake up to the fact that history has been a lie. As difficult as it is to believe, this mapping effort, which is now the single largest LiDAR survey in the history of Mesoamerican archaeology, revealed the presence of 61,480 distinct ancient structures hidden within the dense tropical rainforest of Guatemala. Even though some earlier LiDAR studies had prepared us for this, Just seeing the sheer quantity of ancient structures across the landscape is completely mind-boggling. There were 3 to 4 times as many structures as imaged. One site, El Palmar, is now 40 times larger than had been thought. That's a totally different kind of place than what had been imaged, and it requires a totally new interpretation. This project involved a team of 18 experts from the US, Europe, and Guatemala, and is providing new insights into ancient lowland Mayan civilization, particularly in regards to its demography, agriculture, and political economy. Lowland Mayan civilization flourished for nearly 2,500 years, according to historians, starting around 1000 BC and ending with the arrival of Europeans in the 16th century AD. The ancient Maya, whose range extended from what is today southern Mexico, Guatemala, and Belize, were known for their sophisticated architecture, art, writing, astronomy, and math.
We don't care who likes it or not, as long as we know it's the truth. As long as we know it's the truth.
Do you feel any cultured values in yourself?
Well, the people in Karlstad are very reliable, strong people. And I feel that about myself. I'm strong and I'm very reliable. I'm on time. I get things done. And that's basically a whole German culture, not just Karlstad. I mean, that's a German culture. And, you know, I'm proud to have that German blood. There's no question about it. Great stuff.
Is this you discussing Indian blood? We're going to judge people by whether they have Indian blood?
That probably is me, absolutely. Because I'll tell you what, if you look at some of the reservations that you've approved, you, sir, in your great wisdom have approved, I will tell you right now, they don't look like Indians to me. They don't look like Indians to me, sir.
Thank God that's not the test of whether or not people have rights in this country or not, whether or not they pass your look test.
Mr. Trump, you know in the history of this country where we've heard this discussion before, they don't look Jewish to me.
Oh, really?
They don't look Indian to me. They don't look Italian to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a test for whether people could go into business or not go into business, whether they could get a bank loan. You're too black, you're not black enough.
Hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrant children are made automatic citizens every year because of this crazy policy, and they are all made instantly eligible for every privilege and benefit of American citizenship.
We will build a great wall along the southern border. Zero tolerance for criminal aliens. Zero.
I mean, it's really important for us to remember our history. You know, unless you're one of the first Americans, a Native American, you came from someplace else. Somebody brought you.
There will be no shortcuts or special privileges for the perpetrators of genocide. Columbus is the original illegal immigrant. His arrival, along with the anchor babies he brought with him, signaled the beginning of the colonization of America. Behind me is the ICE Detention Center. Their job is to apprehend and deport illegal aliens, criminals. But they seem to be confused about who the illegals are. For years, they have been wasting billions of taxpayer dollars while failing to apprehend a single illegal European immigrant. Instead, they have focused on terrorizing undocumented Americans who are native to this continent. Now, I want to be clear. Undocumented Americans share very little in common with the illegal European settlers who came to America seeking gold and plunder, eventually stealing all the land from Atlantic to Pacific under a doctrine of manifest destiny. Undocumented Americans come here out of economic necessity to find work and try to feed their families. They should not be targeted by ICE, which should be tracking down the real criminals. The same illegal Europeans who colonized North America are now enacting a second conquest on Central and South America through their neoliberal economic policies like NAFTA, which forces Mexican farmers to compete with subsidized U.S. corporate agribusiness and drives the prices down so far that they are unable to make a profit. This leaves them with only two choices: starve to death or migrate north to a land overrun by illegal Europeans. It's time to say enough is enough.
Woo!
I'm calling for a national Back to Europe movement this Thanksgiving. I want all illegal Europeans to report to ICE for voluntary self-deportation.
That's right!
We have to save America from the illegal immigration that's threatening it. And the best place to start is with ourselves.
Ometeo. Quema. 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 Elevate awareness of continental ownership. Plant the seeds of liberation to dethrone the myth. Over the course of 5 centuries, oppressing the truth. You benefit off of misery, denying the truth. But now you got yourself imminent threat of fierce warriors. Nika Flocka together we set. We the glorious. Instructed wisely, entrusted sacred wisdom. The time is now to confront colonialism.